January 18th, 2017. I want to talk just a little bit about a couple of elements concerning history that there is a vast discrepancy with. If you haven't noticed, there's always a revision of history. If you don't believe me, just test these things and check them out. I really don't have the time and even the capability to annotate everything that I've seen, written, and understood. And truthfully, even if I did, that wouldn't necessarily convince you of anything. So you're going to have to do the homework. Convince yourself, understand what truth is, what is real. So, real quickly, the book, 1984, one of the main tenets of that is that there is a revision of history on a regular basis. Because everything was controlled, the history books and access to that was controlled by a particular entity. It was easy for them to go back and find everything that was recorded about a particular event, circumstance, or individual in history, and they could change it or adjust it to meet their perspective, needs, desires, as the government decided. If you don't think that has gone on, it has and is. Things are not static. If you go back even pre-World War I or World War II, Europe, the Middle East, nations like that, I used to think that these nations had been around for hundreds of years. They haven't. The maps were redrawn. The nations renamed. The people groups sometimes reestablished in other places. That's been going on since the beginning. And so we have a very myopic perspective to think that what we know of history has always been that way. It's not. Very significantly less than what we may think. So one of the things that is troubling is that when you look back at these things that you thought were accurate and how they were recorded, and you begin to gather all the data from, I would say, like concerning World War II, the winning group and the losing group, who won, who lost, what the results really were. It really begins to change your perspective. You have to look at what took place before, for instance, World War II, why World War II developed the way that it did, how it developed, who and what were the causes that brought about some of the significant battles, and why it is that countries won or lost. And yes, we can debate about all of those elements. There are a lot of them, but I can tell you that the mainline story that we've been given, that there was one massive evil man that tried to grab the power of all things in his continent and rule the world, is not an accurate depiction of what took place. You don't have to believe me? Do the research. Predictions were made, even in World War I, of things that were supposed to happen but didn't. Those same predictions were made by certain people to happen in World War II. And believe it or not, they didn't then either. But that prediction was used to be able to manipulate how the record of World War II was recorded. And the people who controlled those avenues, look that up, look up what kind of treaty or agreement was made for media of every aspect, and how that particular agreement for how World War II was going to be relegated to history. That is a startling revelation. And then you begin to see the motives and the purpose behind the war. And yes, it does have to do with money and control. It always does. And yes, you can follow the money, but it's more significant than the money. And it's not just one individual. And the reality of what principalities and powers are behind such things is very significant. That's why the events of history have a certain skew. It's not all true. And you may be wondering, well, how do you know what's true and what's not? That's a good question. One which you will have to deal with. We all have to deal with it. And that's why you have to test everything and trust the one who is always true. That's Yahweh. More on that another time. And as always, test everything, trust Yahweh.